Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry to be late for this very prestigious occasion. I could not find my hair gel and pocket comb. For those of you who do not recognize me and think I'm an imposter because we were acquainted a half century or so ago, I have some photos to verify my identity during the days we were on campus. This is really me. Thank you, Provost Simpson, for your thorough and thoughtful introduction. Although the Environmental Interpretive Center was a gleam in our eyes when Caldy Wood and I walked the area in 1969, and when our first Chancellor, Leonard Goodall, commissioned a plan and a model, your leadership, Robert, on the campus was indispensable, and your assurance of adequate funding made its implementation an outstanding contributor to our community. The dedication and indefatigable and relentless efforts of Vice Chancellor for Government Relations, Edward Begall, made this 20th anniversary possible. Today is the first that I knew of the details of your initiative interactions with Ed Begall and the state of Michigan legislators to acquire 75% of the funding for the center to be written into a law of the state of Michigan. My thanks for your daring do and all that it involved. A special recognition, of course, must be given to Ed Begall for his persistence and perseverance over several decades with the legislators in Lansing. Insiders have said that the legislators in Lansing would give him whatever he wants just to get rid of him. Both Robert and Ed expanded the outreach of our campus to all people in Southeast Michigan, whether they enrolled in classes or not. Thank you. My thanks also to all of you for joining us today for your personal notes about the significant experiences with our campus and your well wishes for the future. At the same time, if any of you alumni still feel you deserve a better grade, please see me about some extra credit research in the environmental study area. Thanks to Dr. Claudia Walters, Dorothy McClear, Rick Simic, Dale Brown, Griffin Bray, and Caitlin Tatro for their excellent review of the Environmental Interpretive Center on this special occasion. I am pleased that it coincides with a legacy lecture in which I will highlight selective aspects of my personal recollections of our 50-year history, our current practices, and aspirations for the future. Raise your hand if you were alive in 1969. I see Don. Okay, there's Mike. There's Cheryl. Good. Thank you. We will have experienced or have had adults recount to you some of the context in which our campus was operating at that time. We were suffering from the scars of the 1967 rebellion in Detroit. We had a military draft requirement for men at that time, and the Vietnam War was in the news daily. I traveled through O'Hare Airport frequently at that time and saw young men my age and younger in military uniforms walking with crutches and arms in slings. Our campus had teach-ins on the legitimacy of the Vietnam War, the pall of assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy hung over our cities. On July 20, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. Also, Dearborn was an all-white community with Mayor Orville Hubbard in charge. Can you remember any of those events? For me, the University of Michigan Dearborn has been a perfect fit with my interests and background. Academically, I had a liberal arts education all through my academic life with a Bachelor of Arts degree from Calvin University. Early on, I learned that all facets of learning and education should be integrated and unified. Thus, I felt comfortable with the growth and development of the liberal arts program at U of M Dearborn from 750 to 9,000 students. Consequently, interaction with the faculty in humanities, engineering, business, education, and behavioral and social and natural sciences was a given and much appreciated. New and rapidly growing programs and curricula offered an opportunity to teach a wide range of courses. I value our commuter campus, which serves people from more than 40 language groups, cultures, and customs. Because the students were residents of our local community, They were personally invested in the environmental issues. UM-Dearborn has an outstanding 300-acre natural area inherited from the Henrik and Clara Ford estate and designed by Jens Jensen. Where else, in a heavily dominated urban industrial area, does one find habitats of forests, meadows, ecotones, fields, a lake, the Rouge River, and floodplain? We need to recognize again Chancellor Goodall and Provost Eugene Arden for their efforts to have the area designated by the Board of Regents of the University of Michigan for preservation and education of our students and the community. We also need to recognize the efforts of Professor Emanuel Hertzler for stopping construction people from filling in the campus lake with soil due to the making of the basements for our buildings. Speaking of the environmental study area, it has existed since Jens Jensen exercised his skills in restoration ecology on the Henry and Clara Ford estate in 1915. At the same time, the adjacent floodplain of the Rouge River existed several thousand years before that. I would like to show a recent discovery of our floodplain. On a walk on the Sugar Maple Trail on the floodplain, you have the impression that the floodplain is flat. Well, the floodplain does look flat, yet we got a different picture effort after Rebecca Swoboda and Molly Hurst measured its elevation every 5 feet on a 600-foot transect from the terrace on the White Oak Trail to the Rouge River. Here is the result of that transect. Note that the terrace drops 8 feet into a back swamp, then rises to a second bottom, then drops slightly to the first bottom from which it rises to a traditional levee, dips into an overflow channel, and finally to the sandy deposition bar of the river bank. Griffin Bray, along with assistance from Kate Truitt, and I inventoried the woody and herbaceous vegetation in each of these habitats and found significant differences in species composition. Let's take a look at the campus since 1969. Let me state the obvious: the campus has changed. The original name was the University of Michigan Dearborn Center, and it's changed its name to University of Michigan Dearborn in 1964. When I arrived with the 750 students who were juniors, seniors, or graduate students with a focus on co-op education in engineering and business, the students were enrolled year-round, 3 semesters per year, October to January, February to May, June to September. They would alternate a semester taking classes on campus and a semester doing full-time internship with one of the companies in the area. As an aside, the calendar was well suited to the members of the Detroit Tigers baseball team because the October to January semester coincided with their season break and made it possible for the Tigers all-star catcher Bill Freehand to attend and graduate from our campus, as well as be part of the 1968 World Series champions. We also had students in education and the liberal arts, including experimental biology and chemistry, and with physics and biochemistry on the horizon. Geology, environmental studies, environmental science, microbiology, integrative studies, behavioral and neurobiology were a dream. You can easily recognize a 10-year-old classroom administration building with the adolescent pin oak trees in front of the now adult pin oaks. And a few years later, the first building funded by the state of Michigan was added. This windowless classroom office building, or COB, looks like it was really a cover for a top-secret CIA headquarters. Many years later, it was remodeled with windows added. Because of the predominance of the men faculty members, we had an active and dynamic faculty wives club, later changed to the faculty women's club. The campus courtyard and the pond was still a nice place to have lunch and to have conversation. This was a campus to which our family moved in July 1969. As the campus grew, so did David and Alan, who went off to college, married, and had families of their own, leaving my wife Charlotte, or Char, and me as empty nesters. But that was not a problem, because I could always come to campus every day and harass other people's children. I want to give special recognition and thanks to Shar, who partnered and managed our family's lives in numerous and inestimable ways. Please take 5 seconds and list all the adjectives that you can think of that describe a really, really nice person. I'll give you 5 seconds. Go. Right, I agree with all of your good things that you thought. I would wrap them all up by saying she's caring, compassionate, and forgiving, especially with me. Summing it up, she's been a lot of fun to live with for 61 years. Her advice for a successful marriage is don't canoe together and don't hang wallpaper together. Thank you very much, Shar. In the fall of 1971, our campus enrolled its first freshman class of 313 students, and the university went through a major transition. We had to design biology and chemistry courses for half of the students who were science majors, and a science course for the other half of the students who chose majors other than science. Rather than teach separate courses in introductory biology and physical science, we took on the challenge, as other disciplines did also, to integrate our natural sciences into one course. Under the direction of Dr. Calvin DeWitt, we implemented a course that he designed as a 2-semester course built around the environment, called Matter, Energy, and Life, or MEL. That's where we learn that matter cycles, energy flows, and life adapts. At that time, Scientific American published special volumes which served excellent reading material for the students. We had only a few weeks in the summer of 1971 to design the laboratory for 150 students and purchase all the equipment. All the while, we were directing an 8-week National Science Foundation Institute for middle and high school teachers. But we improvised. And we began teaching about adaptations of living organisms by studying the adaptations of the weeds on the lawn in front of our buildings, especially the dandelion. And we asked then the students to bring weeds from their lawns and gardens to characterize their adaptations to their environment. We also went to the Lower Rouge River along Michigan Avenue near the current location of Andiamo's restaurant and had teams of students map the meanders of the river and determine the ratio of the channel meanders to downstream distance and the width of the channels with sextants, tripods, survey rods, and measuring tapes. Keep in mind, we had no GPS units and labor beams or computers to develop maps. Matter, Energy, and Life is the only course from the freshman curriculum to survive the shift to more strictly traditional university disciplinary courses. Recently, a student from this class wrote of her distinct and clear memories. She is a research epidemiologist with over 300 refereed publications. In addition to examination of the biological factors of her diseases that she studied, she integrates the patient's social, emotional, and environmental factors into her analysis, and she attributes her science education beginning in MEL to the integration of her studies. I had the privilege to team teach the course with Dr. Cal DeWitt, who left for the Gaylord Nelson Institute of Environmental Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he also founded the program at the Au Sable Institute of Environmental Studies. Dr. David Emerson, an organic chemist, taught about pollutants in air, water, and acid rain. Dr. David Sokoloff, a physicist, taught about energy and later served as the course director. In 2020, David received the Physics Educator of the Year award from the American Association of Physics Teachers. With this prestigious honor, he joined a group of physicists which included many Nobel Prize winners. Here he is introducing students in Vietnam to physical principles using his unique strategies for learning. In his acceptance of the award, he graciously acknowledged the influence of his experiences of directing the Matter, Energy, and Life course on our campus for his initiative and success in redesigning physics education. Let's now look at the U of M Dearborn and its involvement in the environmental movement. Several major environmental events took place in 1969. The Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught fire, and not to be outdone, we in Detroit inadvertently set our Rouge River on fire. But the climax of it all was the Santa Barbara oil gusher of 1,000 gallons per hour for a total of 3 million gallons caused by an explosion on an oil rig. President Nixon visited the site personally. This catastrophe, along with foul weather and unbreathable air, resulted in a cascade of alphabet soup environmental legislation, including NEPA, CAA, CWA, TSCA, and more. 1970 was the year of popularizing the environmental movement with teach-ins. First in the nation at my alma mater was Northwestern University, where my laboratory for biological rhythms of desert iguanas had been turned into the teach-in headquarters, and then at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. The National Earth Day, April 22, 1970, was led by Senator Gaylord Nelson of Wisconsin. Coincidentally, it was the 100th birthday of Vladimir Lenin, and the conspiracy theorists had a field day, connecting the so-called subversive intentions of the environmentalists with communism. On our campus, the student group, the Dearborn Naturalists Association, DNA, led by Michael Thiele, who's with us today, organized a highly successful 2-day weekend celebration and our teach-in on the campus prior to Earth Day itself. We had a notable guest speaker, a selection of films, the kinds you show in a movie projector, and literature. We also had the first self-guided tour of the environmental study area. On Earth Day itself, the students went to the elementary, middle, and high schools throughout the area, and they made presentations to their students. We have not had an event like it since. I believe it was due to the closeness and camaraderie of the students from all disciplines. Our university responded to the upsurge in all things environmental, recognizing that the environmental topics range from the sciences of ecology and biology and the physical sciences of air, water, and soil, geomorphology, and energy, as well as policy, politics, economics, education, organizational management, and ethics. We implemented both the environmental science program and the environmental studies program in 1975. Because careers in the many areas of environment were not as obvious as they were in the areas of pre-medicine, business, engineering, and education. We also were the first programs in Castle to require an internship to connect the students to the world of work. After 50 years, people invariably ask, have you noticed a change in the students? My response is, that is difficult to say because I have changed as well. Yet one noticeable change is in the dress and the clothing. A majority of men faculty members wore coats and ties in class. The students changed in wearing apparel, too. They show off how wealthy they are by paying extra money for jeans with holes in the knees and intentionally frayed fabric on the thighs to be able to look poor. Perhaps some of you alumni remember that smoking cigarettes in class was common. A particularly egregious practice was conducted by a cellular biology laboratory instructor. In cell biology, students are likely taught that nicotine paralyzes the cilia of the human trachea. In his 4-hour laboratory stint, he smoked more than a dozen cigarettes. I know for a fact, because he dropped the butts in the sink in the lab. Moving on to my teaching experiences in biology and environmental courses. My first teaching assignments were environmental physiology, comparative anatomy of vertebrates, and introductory biology, all with laboratories, as well as the methods of teaching biology in middle school and high school for the education department. Actually, I was really a lifelong student disguised as a professor. Over time, I began to see teaching more like coaching. My number one course was field biology, which I taught 89 sections. My first section of field biology in 1970 had 70 students. We split into two sections, obviously. This was a memorable class, and I can picture nearly all of the students. At the end of the semester, they presented me with a book, Fire Island, which I have displayed in my bookcase ever since. Starting in 1990, due to the large number of students, once again we had two sections of field biology. I was joined by my colleagues Judy Nesbitt, providing expert with terrestrial invertebrates, Rick Simmet, leading the study in aquatic invertebrates, and Dorothy McClear, contributing expertise in mammal projects and interpretive and communication strategies. In my mind, field biology is the epitome of experiential learning. Every spring, during the most dramatic phenological changes of the year, the course is taught in an outdoor classroom and living, breathing, photosynthesizing, metabolizing, mating, and reproducing plants and animals, fungi, and microbes, namely our environmental study area. And the key component of the teaching learning strategy is serendipity. We never have the same class twice. It's similar to the adage that you cannot step into the same river twice. Each spring semester we observe the dynamic changes from the cold weather season through the vernal weeks to the summer solstice. The 6 a.m. section began the semester 20 minutes early, before sunrise, and by the end of the semester, the sun was rising as we began class. We witnessed the dynamics of incredible spring migration of birds, which gather protein from the emerging insect larvae, which are feasting on the huge salad bar of tender leaves just breaking bud. We also witnessed the timing between the insects gathering nectar and getting pollen on them to carry to sexually active wildflowers. Sounds like a paradise to me. As a result, we developed a keen sense of place represented by Southeast Michigan. Science courses are known for their hands-on learning. Well, field biology is a total experiential learning endeavor in addition to hands-on. It's eyes alert, ears attuned, olfactory senses sniffing, tactile transmissions through finger nerve endings, and wet feet from early morning dew, not only hands-on but rained-on, mud-on shoes, and sun-on sunscreen, and sitting on concrete to study sidewalk cracked plants. And finally, on the last day of the course, stimulating the taste buds with lamb's quarter soup, elderberry fritters, steamed cattail flowers, sautéed daylily buds, and salads with a variety of greens. We call it eating our Wheaties. Of course, as scientists making recording and processing all of our observations on adaptations of dozens of species and their interactive behavior with other species, well, that can be daunting. And yet, I'm confident and pleased that we all came away from the course with a view of the world expressed by the esteemed scientist Rachel Carson, with a sense of wonder at the world we live in. The learning and teaching strategies demonstrated in field biology are applicable in habitats worldwide, even when the plants and animals are new to the learners. I had the privilege and pleasure of teaming with colleagues from Tamil Nadu, South India, 18 times to study and teach with students from North America and India on the ecology of the Indian tropics. Now, what did we learn in our environmental courses? Much of my teaching focused on environmental issues, no surprise there. One of the courses I designed and taught was Concepts of Environmentalism, EST 301, which complements the basic environmental science course about how the world of air, water, soil, plants, animals, and energy works. The goal of the Concepts course examines the issues behind the obvious or proximal environmental issues. On the first day of class, before reading through the syllabus and learning the dates of the exams, we worked in small groups to identify as many environmental topics and issues as possible in about 20 minutes. Collectively, we put the issues on the whiteboard until we had at least 50 topics. We stepped back, viewed the issues, and posed several questions. How many more issues could we identify? Obviously, many more. How many courses have you taken in which you know this much about the subject matter even before you see the syllabus? This learning situation is called andragogy, a process by which students come to the course with considerable awareness and/or knowledge of the subject matter. So, how do we go about solving each of these issues? Of course, some of them are related and can be worked on together. Typically, we use the traditional or classical method of problem solving, which is a tunnel vision approach. We choose a problem, recognize impacts and hazards of each of these 50 issues of air, water, or soil, or disappearing species. We bring the issues to the attention of the public and the lawmakers. We pass laws to prevent pollution or to restore habitats. We establish enforcement procedures. Using this tunnel vision approach with each issue is overwhelming because each of these issues has its own interest group and lobbyists opposed to change and regulation. Thus, we ask the question, are there some causes behind these issues that we can address and get at the root cause of all or most of these issues? That question brings us to the difference between proximal issues versus ultimate issues, the underlying causes or root causes of these proximal issues. Could we make headway if we dealt with the ultimate issues rather than address each of the 50-plus issues on an individual basis? Thus, the first assignment for the students, due in the next class period, required them to identify 3 to 6 ultimate issues behind these 50 proximal issues. In other words, what are some root causes that cause or drive all of these problems? In the second class period, the students reassembled in the same groups, shared their ultimate issues, and if the students in the group had the same or similar ultimate issues, they wrote them on the board. Did we generate 25 or 30 ultimate issues from the original 50? No. Year after year, the students generated similar ultimate issues behind the proximal issues. Invariably, the results were myopia, historical amnesia, greed, arrogance, ignorance, and tunnel vision. Well, myopia is in our DNA as part of our fight and flight for short-term survival. Historical amnesia means that we forget the lessons learned from the past. How can we overcome our myopia and historical amnesia and extend our vision beyond the 24-hour news cycle, the weekly summary of the news, the 2, 4, 6-year election cycle? The issues that we deal with expand to encompass infrastructure which lasts for 30 to 55 years in a time period, the life of roads, bridges, and pipelines. Ecological processes take place over 50 to 80 years, which are required to develop soils for prairies and restore wetlands. And we deal with the geological time frames of 100 to 1,000 years to replace and purify groundwater, remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, and maintain nuclear materials storage. It's a challenge to be able to live in our society and remember the past while we consider life for future generations. How do we solve the problem of greed? We are bombarded with incentives to consume more at the least expensive price. Where's the vaccine to overcome greed and substitute frugality and joy and happiness of relationships with care, compassion, and concern for others? Here is a quote from James Gustav, or Gus Speth, the top U.S. advisor on climate change, which adds support to this ultimate issue. He says, materialism is toxic to happiness, and we are losing our connection to the natural world. Well, let's look at arrogance. It expresses itself in the attitude that we know it all and have all the answers. We often hear, "Don't worry, we have that covered," in a common paternalistic response to questions of concern. Our pride and arrogance cause us to ignore the precautionary principle. If our university is a leader for change in our society, could we offer a concentration in humility as a solution to the ultimate issue of arrogance, and thus deal with many problems simultaneously? Again, a quote from Dr. Speth is appropriate. He says, "I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science would address these problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. The same thing our students realized by the second day of class. And to deal with these," he said, "we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And scientists don't know how to do it." A similar statement of confirmation comes from India's first Prime Minister, Mr. Nehru. He said, "It is now clear that science is incapable of ordering life. A life is ordered by values." Well, when it comes to the ultimate issue of ignorance, we at the university have to live by the motto, "Stomp out ignorance," and we know how to do that. We wish it were that simple, however. Human beings are not robots. We look at the world through our spectacles of values and beliefs. For example, some hold the belief by faith that human ingenuity will solve any and all problems. Thus, we may claim that more education that provides the facts from science is enough to convince us. Now we know that's not true. Witness the controversy about climate change and evolution. We need to look at the social, behavioral, and philosophy disciplines for important contributions to help us understand how our values and beliefs relate to humans, as we understand the world, how it functions, and the urgency of the concept of the tipping point. By now, it's obvious that ultimate issues are different kinds of problems than pollution and energy consumption. These issues deal with a number of characteristics. No one person or agency is responsible or accountable. The issues have no clear problem definition. The issues are socially complex. Multiple stakeholders are involved and they have conflicting agendas. The problems and solutions straddle organization and disciplinary boundaries. And finally, the solutions are not right or wrong, but they are better or worse. These features characterize as grand challenges and are also more commonly called wicked problems. This discussion brings to mind Harvard professor Edward O. Wilson's statement that we are drowning in information while starving for wisdom. The world henceforth will be run by synthesizers, people able to put together the right information at the right time. Think critically about it and make important choices wisely. In other words, we need people who can put the world together instead of only taking it apart in our silos called disciplines, departments, and programs. My name for this process of putting the world together is called a liberal education, in which we become liberated or free to learn, work, and explore outside our major or outside our job description, and to think outside the box. Interestingly, Wilson's description fit our campus when it became a four-year institution in 1971. And now it seems that the COVID-19 pandemic is directing our campus more rapidly in that direction once again. Having said all this leads us to the question, how do we see and relate to the world? Our behavior on planet Earth is vital and crucial for our long-term survival. We have a long history of viewing the world ego-logically rather than ecologically. The first way we view the world is with a commodity. This is a dominant view that sees us as objects or commodities to be bought or sold. In Michigan, we saw forests as a means for financial gain and profit. Thus, the lumber barons cut down all the trees except 42 acres at Hartwick Pine State Park and sold them for lumber to build houses in Detroit, Grand Rapids, Flint, Kalamazoo, and most of the cities in our state. Subsequently, the land was sold as a commodity for production of wheat, beans, corn, and milk with names like Kellogg and General Mills. David McCulloch, in his recent book, The Pioneers, resurrects this old poem from the Ohio River Valley. The axe in stalwart hands, with steadfast stroke, the savage echoes of the forest woke, and one by one, breaking the world-old spell, the hardy trees, long crashing, with thunder fell. Not only were the trees a commodity, so was the land. Quoting again from David McCulloch, Henry Knox and Alexander Hamilton were investors in the Ohio Company for speculating on making money from the sale of land from the Ohio River Valley. From whom did they buy the land? Their money went into the United States Treasury, as if it had a right to sell it out from under the first people. As the Europeans moved westward and extirpated the beaver for hats, mined silver and gold for fortune, plowed the rich soil of the prairies, and made a dust bowl, this was seeing the world as a commodity. Now in Michigan, groundwater is a commodity, sold in containers made from the commodity of fossil fuel. Viewing our world as a commodity is part of our country's founding practices and heritage. A second view of the world is as resources for our consumption. This view is confirmed in the account of the Pioneers, again by David McCulloch, who states that the new arrivals at the confluence of the Ohio and Muskingum rivers would not only provide timber aplenty for houses and boat building, but were sure of the fertile soil. The trees and soil, along with the water and air, were seen as resources for consumption or deposition of wastes. For a local example, the Rouge River was viewed as a resource for the deposition of sanitary and industrial waste. A former resident living near our campus recounted to me how people who lived on the bank of the Rouge River had their outhouses perched on the end of a dock above the river. That image may seem disgusting, but keep in mind, outhouses were common throughout the area before the installation of sanitary sewers. Yet when sewers were installed after 1940 to carry sewage to large underground sewers called interceptors, they were not large enough to carry the wastewater during heavy rainstorms. Consequently, sewers backed up into basements. The solution called for combined sewers of rainwater and sanitary waste to be discharged directly to the Rouge River during heavy rain events. Over time, 152 of these sewers were installed, and all the above substances and materials that could float into the Rouge River during a heavy rain. Today, more than half of these combined sewers, or CSOs, have been closed. Yet, in actuality, thousands of our houses and businesses had their outhouses on the river because we saw the Rouge River as a resource. Likewise, we viewed the air as a resource for disposal of waste as well. This sequence of actions and decisions also illustrate the axiom that today's solution may be tomorrow's problem. More recently, Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chair of World Economic Forum, which meets in Davos Cloister in Switzerland, described our atmospheric resource as follows. The economic boon of the past 75 years came at a high price. Almost all of the CO2 budget the world had to avoid catastrophic warming is now used up. In other words, the atmosphere is full of CO2. If we want to avoid even a 2-degree event of warming, the next generations, both in the U.S. and around the world, would either have to stop leading the energy-consuming lifestyle of their parents or Western peers altogether, or come up with clean alternatives in less than a decade. In other words, we've used the atmosphere to deposit our carbon dioxide and so-called waste materials until we filled the air without regard to the law of conservation of matter. If we take carbon from the ground, it has to go somewhere. If we remove the recyclers of carbon by deforesting, the carbon overfills its atmospheric budget. A third view of the world comes from a description by Robin Wall Kimmerer in her book, Rating Sweetgrass. Dr. Kimmerer is an ecologist at the State University of New York, Syracuse. She's a member of the Potawatomi tribe of First People of the continent. She describes the living and non-living world as a gift from the Creator Sky Queen. How does the world of gifts compare to a world of commodities and resources? Well, I grew up believing that commodities and resources were legitimately up for grabs by the firstest with the mostest. Suppose someone offers you a gift of freshly picked green beans from their garden, or bakes a birthday cake in your honor, or gave you a painting of a sun setting down Jensen's Meadow in a notch of the trees over the lake on June 21. Would you see these as commodity and part of the market economy? Would you immediately think about how much money you could get if you sold those items? Would you use a painting in its frame as a resource material to kindle a fire in your fireplace or barbecue pit? When we receive a gift, we give a sincere thank you to the giver. In addition, we likely will return the favor and give something to the giver that we know he or she will value. As a result, we may enter a relationship with the giver and become a friendly neighborhood or co-worker. Thus, we will have a relationship of reciprocity. In the Potawatomi culture, a gift is something that you make and that fits in with the person's preferences and likes. Can we even imagine contemplating as an experiment now, looking at our planet Earth, its creatures and processes of precipitation and evaporation as gifts and not as commodities or resources? For decades, we have been overwhelmed with a market economy of money and the world of commodities for sale and profit, or the resources for consumption without payback. Our leaders are trying to give us hope for the COVID virus by getting the economy back to normal and grow. According to Vlakov Smil in his book, The Frightening Specter of Endless Growth, he claims our worship of the concept of eternal growth has become a religion and our obsession to get the economy back to normal. This will continue This will continue the liquidation sale of our planet and continue to produce great inequities. In a gift economy, we will be giving back as we take from the world. In our current economy, we need to examine when our taking is outright thievery from our next generation or even the next 7 generations, as the First Peoples caution us. In the gift economy, we do not have a bundle of rights. Rather, it comes with a bundle of responsibilities, and our currency will be reciprocity. About 100 years ago, Aldo Leopold wrote, "We abuse the land because we see it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see the land as community to which we belong, we begin to use it with love and respect." In our study of ecology, we examine the living communities of plants and animals within ecosystems. A community has communion between its species. Of course, they do not speak with each other, but are we open-minded enough to recognize that interactions of the fungi transmitting chemicals among the roots of herbaceous plants and trees, as described by Dr. Suzanne Simard of the University of British Columbia in her research, is communication. In a reciprocal society, we will have interactions between people that will develop into communities with citizens who commune or communicate and feel at one with the other, or be in touch with each other. To paraphrase Dr. Kimmerer, from the very beginning of the world, the species were our lifeboat. Now that we have entered the Anthropocene, we must be theirs. But do we know enough about them to save them? Are we humble enough to understand that we are part of their community and that we can commune or communicate with them? Clearly, citizens who view the world as a gift will take care of the gifts. Lewis Hydes, a scholar on gift economies and the creatures with which we communicate, says their world will remain plentiful because it is treated as a gift. We do not trash and toss out gifts. Let's try to relate our biological communities to our urban habitats now. Can we design our urban forests of trees, our parks and parklands, our residential landscapes with the lawns, the greatest monocultures of our country, to commune with each other and with our rivers and lakes and streams in reciprocal relationships? Although the concepts of reciprocity and communing with non-human creatures may appear to be utopian idealism, are you willing to bet that in 100 years from now, we may still view our world as what we now call normal? Will we have the humility and courage to explore and expand how we know the world beyond the realms of science and discover that knowing the world through arts, the humanities, and philosophy is legitimate? Coming back to the present time, living in a world of reciprocity sounds a lot like the popular and important concept of sustainability. Today, we emphasize the goals of sustainability, which include zero net carbon emissions, and we give a hypocritical nod to the law of conservation of matter by recycling some of our stuff. Sustainability is a necessary goal if we wish to live within the bounds of the only planet that we have to live on. Nevertheless, a conversation with a faculty colleague who teaches economics on our campus and agrees that we need to head towards sustainability quickly added, "We don't know how to do it." Thus, we continue to act as colonists rather than natives, takers rather than reciprocators. To me, the concept of the world as a gift is remarkably similar to the Judeo-Christian account of the creation. Again, the Potawatomi view has a sky woman, queen, falling out of the darkness to establish the diversity of life on earth and give it the attributes of a gift to be treated with reciprocity. The first Hebrew account of creation also gives humans a great deal of responsibility for living properly and with the gifts of the creation. They were expected to follow their commission of dominion, but not domination, and charged to rule with respect, justly and fairly, as their kings were required. In the second account of the creation, Adam, whose name in Hebrew comes from the word Adama, which means the earth, is given the responsibility to till and to keep the garden. Examination of the Hebrew word for till and to keep can be similar to taking care of a gift. The word till is abad, which is a root of the word to serve. In other words, to serve the garden with a life of service or to conserve. The word keep in Hebrew is shamar, which translates as keeping for the good and for the benefit of that which is being kept, and not necessarily for the benefit of the keeper. In essence, the keeper is a steward or trustee of the garden. Obviously, the garden keeper or earth keepers will benefit, as will the garden, if there is a relationship of reciprocity. I think this is an eloquent interpretation of the meaning of the relationship of humankind to the creation in which we live. Because of our behavior of abusing the created order with a commodity and resource worldview, we are now taking responsibility for restoration. The discipline of restoration ecology is an important and large vocation and calling. In addition to paid careers, thousands of people of all ages serve as volunteers to restore the habitats, water, soil, and species of plants and animals throughout the world. We are deeply grateful for the volunteers who restore our environmental study area on Stewardship Saturdays. Again, volunteers are the heart and soul of the Friends of the Rouge, which was founded on our campus and where many of our alumni serve on its staff and board of directors. Similar organizations such as the Friends of the Detroit River, Southeast Michigan Land Conservancy, the Michigan Botanical Club, the Greening of Detroit, Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice, and dozens more in Michigan benefit from the reciprocity of volunteer and servant leaders. According to Klaus Schwab, who wrote The Young Have a Right to be Angry, he states, the median age of the world is less than 30 years, which means that young people are actually the most important and most affected stakeholders when talking about our global future. These are also the people who have the most innovative ideas and energy to build a better society for tomorrow. And now listen to this. This is from an economist. We should move away from a narrative of production and consumption to one of sharing and caring. Young people are the best place to lead this charge. Let's give them that opportunity. Even if we live sustainably in a world as a gift economy, I have often asked the students for comment on another question. Why bother? Is there a reason or purpose for everything? Or as Francis Collins, the director of the National Institutes of Health, asks, what is the purpose of all this life? It is a question science cannot answer, but it's a question we face continuously. I will conclude with thoughts written by an acquaintance, Dr. Larry Rasmussen, a social ethicist at the Union Theological Seminary. His essay begins, early on, when time and earth were yet young, they all gathered about dawn, the dragonflies and blackbirds, the Swedish ivies and the Boston ferns, though they weren't yet sure about Sweden and Boston, the Tyrannosaurus rexes and the duck-billed platypuses, a lion and a lamb, a woman heavy with child, and the shy young man, and of course, the elder among them, Venus, the morning star. They waited. They all waited to see if it would happen again. With growing impatience, they waited, and waited ever so long. Finally it happened. They broke into applause, grabbed one another by the arm, or wing or front or whatever, did a joyful jig, and sang a funny-sounding song. It really happened again. The sun had come up one more time. And in almost the same place. Morning had broken just like the first morning, and now, as was their habit, they elected a village philosopher of the day and retired to the daily session of the Primitive Theology Brunch Bunch discussion group. It had one and only question, and that it loved to contemplate. Why is there something rather than nothing? And the glow of the astonishing occurrence, the rising of the sun, stayed with them the day long, but soon some grew bored. They quit coming to the regular mid-morning discussion group with its one and only question. They quit gathering at dawn. Some claimed an inalienable right to sleep in. Soon they quit applauding and dancing and singing. There were other things to do: toil, reap, cook, complain, invent aspirin, suffer ulcers and coronaries. Yet God continued doing only wonders, but no one noticed. They would wake up alive, but fail to be astonished at that. See one another, alive and well, but hardly let the mystery of it all register. Eat and drink and kiss goodbye. Breathing, laughing, crying, singing, working, dying, it all went on. God kept only doing wonders, morning like the first. But no one gathered to feel creation anew. They even forgot the question they loved to contemplate. Why is there something rather than nothing? Well, I'll conclude with a less provocative thought, but still a sobering epiphany that I had after 50 years at the University of Michigan Dearborn. I now realize that I have fewer days to live than I have lived. Often in discussions about end-of-life issues, people ask one another what they would like to have people say about them at their funeral while they are standing by the casket and paying their respects. That's a difficult question. Yet I would hope that for me, at least one person would say, "Hey, look, he's breathing!" It's been a wonderful and inspiring time to connect to all of you, and thanks again to all of you who made this opportunity to serve at the University of Michigan Dearborn possible. Best wishes to all of you.